Bear Grylls, Sybil, welcome to the show.
I feel bad because it's taken about 15 minutes to get to this stage, mainly because of me. Not your team have been amazing. I've had all like the family, dogs, and everyone coming to join, but I think we've basically relented, haven't we?
Yeah, I think it's great. I like the dog. I like the fire. You were teaching me about birchwood and what I'll ever need to do if I'm ever in a survival situation and how to start a fire.
Well, that's good. I kind of figured like we're outside with we got Sybil to come and join us. We better have a fire lit, and then it's all good.
It's all very cozy, isn't it? It's all very cozy.
Well, I don't know. I was saying to you before, I find if I have to do chat shows where it's like really in a studio, I find it all quite scary.
Yeah.
I find it quite intimidating. I get really nervous about them, but I do have to do them. If you like promoting a show in the States, part of my work, so I kind of go and do it. But this sort of thing is, first of all, love all you do. I think you're a brilliant man with a great brain and also a great heart. And I look at you as like a truth seeker, which is wonderful, you know. So for me, this is kind of fun. So to be outside, it's nice to have a fire, have the dogs. It's kind of, this feels a happier place, less scary place.
It's gorgeous. And you're not promoting a TV show at the moment. Yeah. You're promoting and discussing the greatest story ever told. You've retold the story of Jesus's life through the sort of first-person perspective of various people. I want to jump into it, but why this book? Why now? For some people, it might be a bit of a surprise. You know, you're the adventure guy, and here's this book about Jesus.
It's a little bit of a surprise for me as well, to be honest. But, you know, I don't know. Faith has been part of my life for a long time, just kind of quietly. Helped me so much over the years, you know, through so much. And I know I just had a really strong, weird feeling last year of like, clear the decks. Clear the decks and write this book. And I just realized, like, first of all, so few people know the actual story of Christ. So few people have like read the Bible, you know, if you ask regular people. And yet the story, if it's true, is so life-changing and so beautiful. And I just thought nobody's ever done it, like told the actual story as a thriller. Short, accessible, easy to read, punchy, theologically accurate, but done as like a sort of, you know, as like a beautiful love story thriller. And I really just had that feeling of like, clear the decks and write the book. And I wrote it actually in a month in the jungle. I was with my son. We were filming another show either side of it. He kept thinking I was on drugs or something. He goes like, you're just writing all day and all night. But it's like, wrote it fast. But then it's been the hardest, but also the best thing I feel I've ever done. And I've said this a few times now, but I would give up every other kind of work accolade in my life to have done this. It's the thing actually I'm most proud of, because it's changing lives and it's touching hearts all across the world every day now. And it's only been out a few months. And I think out of everything I've done, this is the thing I've had the strongest, warmest response from. And like, even just this morning, like message after message after message, when I sort of look at my phone, or a team send me things of like people from all cultures, all faiths, or non-faiths, just saying, mainly I had no idea. Of how incredible this story is. So really proud of it, you know. It's and I feel it's just beginning in a way.
Well, for those who don't know, what you've essentially done is taken the story of Jesus, which in the New Testament, we have our sort of 4 Gospels. We've got these 4 accounts of Jesus' life, and they're told in the third person and quite sort of sparsely. You know, like I think, for example, of in the birth narratives where, or just after the birth narratives where Jesus is sort of, he goes missing, right? Like his family, his mother and father suddenly notice that he's not there, and they search for him for 3 days, and they go and find him at the temple. And in the Gospels, it's sort of very much like, well, they noticed he was missing, they looked for 3 days, they found him in the temple, and there he was teaching. Whereas what you've done is you've taken stories like this, and you've told them from a first-person perspective. So you start by assuming the personality of Mary, the mother of God. And you retell the story because, of course, if your child goes missing for 3 days, that's not something which it's easy to sort of fully depict in sort of 3 short sentences. So you sort of try to expand upon that. But the obvious question is, like, how do you go about doing this? How do you go about taking a story where, like you say, you've got to be incredibly careful to be accurate, because you're telling and like, as you see it, the most important story that's ever been told, but you're kind of having to embellish it in a way. You're having to bring in emotions that aren't made explicit in the text. You're having to get inside of the mind of these characters and speak to these perspectives which are not in the scripture. So how do you approach that while being careful to keep it accurate?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's like, first of all, you're right. You know, the New Testament, if you just look at it, the story, the way it's written is so sparse.
Yeah.
You know, and every story of Jesus is like that example you said of him getting lost. You know, even through the crucifixion is like Jesus was taken to the place of the skull and crucified.
Yeah, right.
Done.
Yeah.
You know, that is it. And I suppose what I've done is expand that a little bit, say actually what that means. So, you know, so rather than just saying he was taken to the place of the skull and crucified, I will say, you know, the Roman soldier grabbed the iron bolt, knelt on Yeshua's, you know, arm, drove it through, and, you know, the words mumbled from his mouth of, "Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing." You know, so just try and put context kind of to it, but at the same time be absolutely theologically kind of accurate. And, you know, the first thing we did was just take a timeline of like, okay, here we go. Because you got 4 accounts. And as you know, the Gospels differ. It's part of the sort of beauty of the authenticity of it is that like they differ, you know. So we first of all had to take the timeline and then pull out the kind of the actual, one thing I didn't change a single word of is the words that Jesus spoke. So that was like, when I had that kind of feeling of clear the decks and write this book, the next feeling I had was like, but do not add a single comma to actually the words that Jesus speaks. So I use different translations, different versions for different, you know, encounters, different scenes, but I don't change a single word that he says. What we are doing is setting the scene for each of those kind of times, you know, he is speaking. So that was part of the challenge, but, you know, I feel we've done it okay. We did a lot of work on it afterwards. I mean, I worked with a lot of theologians for this. So, you know, I actually feel this is no longer my book, actually. It's a genuine sort of feeling of like, it's outgrown me. Yeah. It has a life of its own now, but I'm really proud of the help I got. Andrew Ollerton was incredible, Dr. Andrew Ollerton, who's this super well-renowned theologian. I worked a lot with the Come and See Foundation in the States, who are behind things like The Chosen, the TV series.
Right.
And they had a whole team of theologians that really we had some pretty intense Zoom calls of, you know, like you can't conjecture that. You got to rethink that. And it's like, so we really worked hard for that part. And that's why really they're the kind of being in many ways the actual heroes of all of this.
Well, The Chosen will be a comparison that surely comes up a lot here because, I mean, The Chosen, this TV show that serializes the life of Jesus, they have no choice but to put words in the mouth of Jesus.
Well, they have to go further because they're doing so much more, you know. So they do create dialogue for Chosen. And actually, I think they, you know, by their own admission, it's one of the things they get, you know, criticism for. I think everything's arguable either way. I think they see it and I see it with The Chosen as well. They just do a brilliant, brilliant job of pointing people towards the light and towards the nature and the character of Jesus.
Yeah.
But with this book, I really wanted to keep it really tight.
Yes.
You know, so the only thing we're going to contextualize is this situation of Jesus, whether it's Jesus meeting this lady, this Samaritan lady at the well, the first time he reveals to anyone on earth his actual divinity. You know, we're gonna set the scene for it and then let it play out.
Yeah, and one of the choices that you make there, because of course you tell the story through the first person perspective. You start with Mary, and then it's Thomas next, and then Simon, then John.
Yeah,
then Mary Magdalene,
you got a good brain. I said this at the start. Well done.
That's just memory.
True.
But that second part, it's Thomas, right? Who it's through the eyes of Thomas that you see Jesus talking to the Samaritan lady at the well. And I suppose you have to make some interpretive choices here in that, like, in the gospel account, Jesus is at the well and he's speaking to the Samaritan lady, and then the disciples come and join him, but you've sort of taken Thomas and you've placed him there like a
Well, I've
like a
placed him as
viewer.
an observer.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mess with the scene. It doesn't mess up the dynamic because it's a very intimate moment,
Right.
really.
Yeah.
You know, so things like that, you had to just requires some thought and some planning and how to do it. But I felt that was kind of a nice way of doing it because it's not messing with the scene or altering the scene, but it just gives a reason for him observing it. But I like Thomas in this. I think the book starts off very innocent with Mary.
Yeah.
You know, as this young teenager, like, you know, he's just been told you're going to give birth to the Almighty, the Son of the Almighty. This is, you know, I know we get so used to it, like with kids' nativity plays and stuff, but it's a pretty shocking revelation. And also it's pretty shocking if God's going to come to earth, to come out of wedlock, you know, born out of wedlock, you know, to somebody is, you know, of such no social standing and such poverty. And so it starts very innocent. And as you say, it's kind of like, you know, even losing Jesus as that 12-year-old, it's like the panic of all of that. But then I want to go in harder with Thomas of like, it's going to take more than a miracle with some wine to change this heart.
Yeah.
Because I kind of feel like taking these 5 different perspectives in the book, it becomes all of our stories. Because all of us at times are the skeptic. All of us are the doubter. All of us are the betrayer. All of us are the arrogant. All of us are the nervous and scared. So I kind of wanted it to have all of these perspectives because that is life. And it was also the reality of their experiences. Though, you know, the people that surrounded Jesus were all of those things. The one thing they weren't is very together or intellectual or brilliant. You know, they were just regular young people. I mean, it's the other thing people forget. The average age of the disciples, 15 to 25. You know, it's really shocking that for me. It was like, hold on, I'm so used to big paintings of Peter with a big beard sat on a rock, you know. But they were kind of like, wow, what is going on?
Yeah.
You know. And I kind of relate to that.
That's one of the reasons that The Chosen is so celebrated. I think what it does well is that so many pieces of Jesus media are about Jesus, whereas this is really about the disciples. It's the chosen. It's the chosen followers of Jesus. And you are sort of going along with them, encountering this character of Jesus, which is what this approach does as well. It puts you in that first-person perspective. But you've said that Thomas, you want to sort of represent different sides of everyone's personalities, and Thomas is the doubter. I heard you say on a different interview that sort of faith and doubt are two sides of the same coin. And of course, any Christian believer will go through periods of strength in faith and weakness in faith. And I suppose right now, especially with the book and the feedback, you're probably feeling pretty good about Christianity and the position in the world. But I wonder if you can talk us through.
Don't assume
whether that's true and
well, I don't think it is true.
Where you're at.
I have many doubts. I really do. I have many moments of real struggle. I don't think it would be right to say like I'm like super confident in my faith. I think I'm the shaky part of this. You know, I really am. And I struggle with many things. And I've just learned that is okay. You know, so when I say faith and doubt, two sides of the same coin, it's not like sort of 90-10, you know, faith and a little bit of doubt, because, you know, I think it's a myth that you find a faith and suddenly like it all comes together. I think for me, finding a faith was like that pilot light, boom, that happened. That light went on. And like, I was a teenager, it was like, I knew it, but nothing dramatic happened. But there was a light there, and that's never gone out. But like a gas flame, sometimes it goes up, and you have moments where like, I know, it's like I've just experienced, this is incredible. And the moments where it's like total madness. And I think actually this last year I've had really challenging moments of like, can it really be true? And, you know, it's where community and sort of good people around you make such a difference. And I feel my brain is really limited. I really do. I feel like I wish I had a better brain. I wish I had a better memory, better understanding of so much of the theology. It's actually why this book has helped me as well. And I listen to the audio of that book all the time, still, even though I've written it, you know, because it's like the simple stuff is the important stuff. And I think sometimes with theology, we get so buried in the semantics and the weeds and the religion that even in our own hearts, we lose sight of what it was about. I mean, Jesus said it so simply. He said, I've just come to seek and save the lost. And it's like, I'm proud to have been amongst the lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to complicate. I don't want to sort of over-religify sort of the job. I'm not asking to be made a theology don.
Yeah.
I'm just really happy to start the day on my knees and to receive help.
Mm.
And I try never to complicate it beyond that. So I wouldn't want people to get the impression or the feeling like, I'm riding high on faith. Because to be honest, that is a daily thing. The daily struggles are real. But through it all, I kind of hold on to a few promises, even when I'm not really feeling it. And I kind of still somewhere in the pit of my heart and soul, I know I'm loved, and I know there is a presence out there, and it's good, and it's for us, for all of us. But beyond that, I really probably struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mind that. I've learned that that's just part of life.
And I suppose part of the decision...
Does that make sense?
Of course. And I think putting the story in the voice of Thomas, who is traditionally thought of as the skeptic because of that episode at the end of Jesus' life. Although even in Thomas's life, I think there's a period where Jesus wants to go and visit someone who's died, and the disciples say, what's the point? This person's dead, and it's Thomas who stands up and says, no, we should go with him. So I think Thomas is sometimes a bit maligned as being fully characterized as doubting, but that story definitely captures that. We'll get back to Bear in just a moment, but first, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you'll know that for some time now, I've been recommending a great way to deal with bias in news media. Do you trust the news? I know I don't a lot of the time, and that's got to do with the bias that inevitably seeps into media reporting. Today's sponsor, Ground News, can help you with that. Ground News aggregates thousands of local and international news outlets all in one place, so you can compare reporting across the political spectrum. Take a look at this story about the Pope urging Italy to remain open to migrants. Using Ground News, I can see that for whatever reason, only 16% of the sources reporting on this story are right-leaning. This means that if you only tend to read right-leaning news, you could have missed this story altogether. And Ground News even has a dedicated blind spot tab, which specifically seeks out stories that you would otherwise miss based on the news you normally read. So help to cut through bias and get to the real story by going to ground.news/AlexOC or by scanning the QR code that's on your screen. Use my link to get 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan. And with that said, back to Bear. But I'm really interested in hearing you say that how, even listening to the book that you wrote, because of the fact that it takes you back to what's important, it can be quite sort of comforting remembering that that's what it's all about. But presumably in the process of putting that together, because you've got to make these choices and you've got to speak to theologians and you've got to look at this chronology and, how does it go together? Like John's gospel has Jesus flipping the tables at the temple near the beginning, and the synoptic gospels have it near the end, and you've got to sort of work it. And I wonder if the result is a reminder of the beautiful simplicity of the core story, the process of writing it, was that a process of finding these things and going, gosh, I don't know about this, and experiencing doubt in that process? Or was the process a more sort of invigorating process for your faith?
I think, I think sort of putting context to the story brought it alive more and more as I did it.
Right.
Of taking it out of, as you say, the sparse simplicity of just how it's written in the New Testament. To be honest, that was always my experience. I'd always try and, as part of my daily life, read a little bit from the good book, try and do it every day. But it could be hard, and I think once you actually get into the stories, and also we become so familiar with the stories, that's the other danger. And that's why that's why Thomas, for example, I don't call him Thomas. He's Taum. They're all the local Aramaic names, because I think otherwise you go, Thomas, this guy is going to be full of doubt. When actually, as you say, he was probably incredible. Had a few moments of doubt that becomes his trademark signature for the rest of mankind. So I wanted people to arrive like I was arriving at this, totally fresh, of no expectation. And what's been so interesting, I've had so many notes from top theologians around the world. And when I see it coming in, I'm always like, oh God, what's it going to say? It's going to be picking holes in this. And because like anything, nothing's going to be perfect, you know.
Mhm.
But actually, time and time again, it's like going, I read this and I thought, that's interesting. And I find myself referring back to the accounts and realize I hadn't actually noticed that. It's actually right. You know, it's like,
Mm.
and I don't know, there were loads of little moments like that. And that was my journey of discovery as well. Of, you know, even little things like we always think the first people that saw Jesus were the wise men.
Right.
You know, because of course the wise men would come before the rough shepherds in dirty clothes and bad language and stinking of horse manure. You know, of course the king was to come. But as you know, the first people to see the baby Christ were the outcasts, the people who weren't even at Passover time allowed into the town because they were considered unclean.
Mm-hmm.
So they were kept outside the city limits always.
Mm.
But the star leads these rough-speaking, shepherds in to see the baby. And it's only really, they think, like 2 or 3 years later that these mystics, again, not, they're called wise kings, but actually they were realistically, I think, sort of Eastern mystics,
right,
who had been following this, the alignment of the stars with this conviction that the Savior is to be born in the city of David. Yeah. And they come and they provide what eventually is financial support for the years that they were about to live as refugees when they were.
That was really interesting because you talk about sort of them being gifted this gold, this sort of golden ornament, and this frankincense, and these gifts aren't really reflected on. But yeah, it made sense to think, well, if this precedes a flight to Egypt, this could be what they use to get through.
Well, I think part of it. I mean, again, it's conjecture, isn't it? Who knows? But it makes sense. So like maybe the gold was just gave enough to last those years of living as nomads and refugees in the Egyptian desert, But then again, that would have been only the gold, I read a thing on this the other day. I can't remember what the frankincense was for, but certainly the myrrh, I think, was the burial one, So that was, is that right? I think it's right. Frankincense was something else.
Yeah.
But again, there's so many elements like this that we skip over, that it's like, for me, it's like too brilliant,
right,
to just have this story to fallen in these places, and that's a part for me is reassuring. And back to your times when you're saying of doubt, one of the ways I deal with my times of doubt is to look back of like actually and that's why this book has helped me so much in my own journey of faith. But I almost feel it's that phrase, the theology of embarrassment. Have you heard of this?
I don't think so.
It's that if you were crafting a true story, there's some embarrassing elements to the story.
Right. Yeah.
Or I think maybe they call it criteria of embarrassment.
Yeah, absolutely.
That just you wouldn't do.
That you wouldn't make up.
The child of wedlock, the sort of, you wouldn't write of yourself like betraying Jesus 3 times or appearing first to women and, in the resurrection. And it's a whole list of these sort of things and it's those elements that always kind of, I find reassuring.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I come from a very simple brain, I really do.
But I think it's brilliantly put together, and I some things jumped out at me. I've been trying to study the New Testament for years now, and so it was really interesting. I can imagine why you're getting emails from people saying this is really weird. Like people might read, for example, that you say that there are 5 wise men, 5 magi. Most people think that there were 3.
Well, where's that come from?
But the Gospels don't say that.
Exactly. It's little things like that. But
which also, I think, allow people... I really think that when you go and watch that nativity scene at the school or whatever, and you see... and
the green lobster in the manger.
Yeah. Like, there are the 3 wise men.
Yeah.
But if you see 5 of them come in, it just sort of stops you for a second. And even though you know that those are the magi, you think, oh gosh, there are 5 of them. Why are there 5? Wait, who are they? And it makes you sort of see it with fresh eyes, as it were. So I was wondering,
it's fresh eyes that is how I encounter this, and it's fresh eyes for people that I want. And that's why I think people are responding to this, because if you arrive with the preconception of like, this is a book about this, and this is what I know, it's like, I want people to start from ground zero. This is where I started. And it's like, I think the other factor is we've had 2,000 years of the story being ruined. And I really feel that. I feel there's 2,000 years of an awful lot of religion has ruined it. Dressed it up in sort of a lot of sort of, corrupt churches and corrupt sects and corrupt sort of, religions. And I don't know, it's just like we've done a really good job as humankind of spoiling a really beautiful story if it's true. And I kind of feel like in my own life as well, it's my own journey of faith was that as well. I found I had a really beautiful natural faith as a kid, whereas like I know that it's just there's a connection, it was no more than that.
Yeah, right.
And then I went to school and suddenly like everyone was speaking in Latin and wore white robes. It was all very full. I had a mini version of what humans are experiencing 2,000 years of thinking this is what God is, telling me not to do this, speak in Latin, behave yourself and shut up.
Yeah.
So for me, it's been a lifetime of unraveling that to find actually that's the bathwater. Dirty, grubby, was probably going to make you sick. But the baby in this thing, if you can take him out of the bathwater, is amazing. And I want people to experience that baby, the real story of how it really was to have walked that land with this man. I wanted people to find that afresh.
And there's something, finding it afresh implies that, I can pick up this book and I've never heard this story before and I'm discovering this. But also if you are familiar with the New Testament, you'll pick this up and hopefully it'll be new. Like if somebody came to you and said, I've heard about this Jesus guy, but I've never really understood the story before. Would you say to them, like, this book that I've written will take you through that story? Or would you say to them, tell you what, go and read the 4 Gospels, then come back and read this as a kind of commentary or retelling? Like, would this be a starting point for people?
Because I think it is a starting point. But the irony is, it's also like at whatever level you're at, it works. Yeah. And I think ultimately you're never going to improve on the Bible. The Bible is always going to be number one, because you can't improve on, But I think it's stepping stones. It's cold. It's hard for people to go to cold to boiling in one step sometimes. Sure. And I've had this experience with one of my best friends who's a brilliant brain, like you, an Oxford guy, strong sort of atheist guy. And I remember saying to him years ago, I said, you should just do you know that you should just read the 4 Gospels? And he goes, no, you're right. I've just got to do that because I actually haven't studied. I'm going to do it. And then kind of didn't, or then dipped in and then got a bit bored. Because as you say, it's sparse.
Yeah.
To me, I think when you have faith, it's like the scales come off a little bit and you see the sparsity as the beauty.
Yes.
And the honey is there. But it's hard to just say, read it. So I kind of wanted to take people on a bit of a journey with that. And that journey takes many forms and that will play a part.
Those decisions that you made, like, some of them are seemingly a little bit arbitrary, like the 5 magi, not 4, not 6. Like, did you just sort of pluck that out of thin air? Did you just have to go with something?
I want to trip people up on what they think of as real, when actually it's just convention.
Right. Okay.
I wanted people to go, hold on, and most people would just skip over that. But I quite like it when I get theologians going, I kind of was interested in that. Mary, I always thought she rode on a donkey to Bethlehem, but actually. There's nothing about that. The donkey was Jesus rode on a donkey into Jerusalem for that final week as a symbol of servitude. I kind of like tripping people up on things people think is real to help them find out actually what is maybe real. And along the way, there's, because again, I think that's been my journey of like, you get so used to hearing people talk at you from a church. And that goes in here, but it doesn't go in here. So sometimes it's like you need to disconnect to reconnect.
Yeah. And that chronology that you were talking about before, when you sat down to put this together, you have to make some probably relatively tough choices because they're quite thematically relevant. Like if Jesus flips the tables near the end of his life, that's maybe part of the reason why he's arrested and crucified. If it's at the beginning of his life, then it's not. Did you just sort of sit down in the jungle and work it out for yourself? Did you consult theologians?
That bit we
how
did
you
really
put that together?
Carefully with theologians. And he does flip the table at the end.
At the end as well.
But he also does at the beginning.
Yeah, because that's doing it twice is the solution, right?
Which was the solution. And sometimes that sort of thing works because that's accurate. One gospel says it's that done the beginning and on a separate occasion. And then there was another, that epic sort of final week is
Yeah.
important to get, that chronology absolutely right. But exactly when he crossed from Galilee to feed the 5,000 and to free the demon-possessed man in here, and that journey, we kind of, you just got to kind of eventually commit to one way, haven't you? And that's why there were these epic Zoom calls with a lot of theologians where we eventually go, let's do it like that. But it's interesting. Some of the discussions were like things like, but hold on, Jesus didn't have brothers and sisters. The Catholics will really fervently believe he didn't have brothers and sisters. And it's like, and I'd written it in this early bit with brothers and sisters, but of course, then the Aramaic translation of brothers and sisters actually implies a wider family of cousins. And it was like, let's not even trip people up on it. I don't want to like put that line in that about Jesus' brothers and sisters and then lose Catholics who go, well, because I don't agree with that, I'm going to discard the rest of the book.
Yeah.
Those are called stumbling blocks for people. So just remove it. Take that bit out. Don't be a stumbling block. Let's get people to the real meat rather than getting sort of hung up because we're arguing about the herbs in this meal,
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about the sort of brothers.
So just take it. We just took that line out, and we did that a lot on things.
I was going to ask, are there other bits that you just sort of removed that
yes,
you would have otherwise
lots of
written
things
about?
that in the first draft, it's like, actually that's going to be tricky for people of different faiths and stuff, but it doesn't add anything to the story.
Right.
So let's just keep it flowing.
Can you think of an example? Not to make you have a position on it, but the kind of debate that you thought wasn't worth having in the book.
I think that was a key one.
Right, the brothers.
Yeah.
Because of course it's the question of the perpetual virginity of Mary, right? If Jesus has brothers, then Mary's had other children, and if he doesn't, then maybe she didn't.
Exactly.
And I can see why that's, at least in a project like this, worth just sort of left untouched, perhaps.
Yeah, because don't be a stumbling block. All I want for this is to be a bridge for people, a gate for people. It's what it's proving. That's why I get these people of so many cultures and faiths writing about this. It's like, it's an accessible way of finding out this love story. And I don't want to be a stumbling block. It's why we've changed the names. It's why we've gone back to the old names and the old places. So you arrive at it fresh.
Yeah. You spoke on another podcast about this analogy that you draw. Only you mentioned how people have sort of messed up the story and gotten it wrong over the past few thousand years. And I think it's pretty easy to point to examples of where people have gone astray. And you've compared this in the past to Elvis Presley.
Well, first of all, we're all part of that story of messing it up. So I'm not sat here going, religion's messed it up, you've messed it up, you've messed it up. I've messed it up, is the truth. I've messed it up because none of us tell the story of Christ very well. So when my Elvis thing was like, most people love Elvis, but we think the Elvis impersonator is a little bit weird, which is sort of probably a fair description. And I feel that a little bit about faith. If you actually get to the meat of, of the story of Christ, what his nature, which was radical and free and laughter and, like the Pharisees, the main accusation for those 3 years of his ministry against them is that he was a glutton and a drunkard. At which point Jesus would have roared with laughter and said, on one hand you're saying to my cousin John, you're like this, and there's me, you're saying, it's not how we imagine Jesus.
Right, exactly. You sort of
So
imagine.
I feel like the church has, and we are part of messing that up because we've formalized and we've put it in religion. We've made it all very kind of like we it's our human nature. We like to put things in a box, but love doesn't live in a box. So we're always going to kind of mess it up. I am part of that, even to the extent. I mean, I'll give you an example. Like the other day, my eldest son, his girlfriend, who's wonderful, she goes, "Just tell me about your faith. Tell me about the faith stuff." She was reading she saw the book. And I kind of stumbled through some really, and after about 3 minutes, I thought, I could see Jesse look at me going, "What are you?" It's like, you're making absolutely no sense. And it's like, I just thought, I've explained this so badly. And it's like trying to describe a really sort of, trying to like describe swimming to somebody who's never seen water. You jump in this thing and it's all around, it keeps you up, can feel pretty scary, feels like wet and like crazy, but then like,
Yeah.
And she was so sweet, looked at me like, you're really making no sense. And I thought, thank God love shines and spreads without, thank goodness it's not all dependent on us, because I don't do a very good job of that. So I include myself in the messing up of the story over 2,000 years. We've all been part of that.
It's amazing to hear you say that because of the way the book turns out. So I guess, you can think about it a bit more and consult people if you're having issues. But that makes me think, I understand when if someone just comes to you and says, tell me about this faith thing, tell me about this Christianity thing. It's like, whoa, where do I even begin? You must have had that feeling right in the book. Like, did you write this in order? Did you just sort of sit down?
It was a terrifying thing. It was a terrifying thing, but I kind of really just felt compelled to try and start. And I knew where I was going to start, which was picking up the phone to Andrew, who's just become over the years a brilliant, brilliant friend, and is probably the best theological mind that I know, and is really sort of calm and measured and just brilliant. And just said, how would we do this? Where would you take that chronology, for example? What I knew I wanted to do was to get the spirit, to get to strip away, to show why was he called a glutton and a drunkard? Why did everyday people just want to be with him? Why would people fight to get through the crowd just to touch his cloak? Why did the religious elite fear him so much? What was it about this guy that is so the opposite of what I was brought up thinking Jesus was about? Why? That's what I wanted to get to. And then it was just assembling a team to help kind of get it accurate, because ultimately I really cared about that. So much so that even when things were right, we pulled the whole first print run of there were just few things I seen after I thought, hold on, that's not quite right.
Oh, really?
And it's like, I just felt this has got to be right.
Yeah.
And it's why now I do stand actually with, tentative confidence behind it. Not total confidence, because it's sort of human and it's going to have some few flaws, but actually with a good degree of confidence. That's why actually now when I see these emails come through from the professors, my confidence has grown with it.
Yeah.
Is at 99.9% of the time, it's like, I was expecting it to have holes, but actually good job. And that's down to a good team on it.
So this was on its print run and it was ready to go, and you sort of
there were like 50,000
and
copies ready to go.
And you pulled it.
I paid to pull it, yeah.
And was it something in particular, or was it just like a vibe thing?
It was like 3 or 4 things, and it was just like, I knew it's just got to be right. I can't explain. It's like a feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I ended up pulling it, and ended up at the end of it, the editor said, we worked then for a month, redid it. He said, we're good to go. He said, do you know how many changes you've done since you told me it was good as we were ever going to get 3 months ago? He said, you've done 1,200 changes to it. So it's like, I almost know every page, every kind of paragraph on this book now.
I bet.
But not out of anything, but apart from it's brought me closer and closer to the nature of Jesus that I first kind of fell in love with, and has been such a beautiful part of my life. And I need it. I really find it for me, it's like bread and butter and honey every day, that this story.
You don't start with Mary. I mean, you do, but there's this very brief prologue where you sort of flash forward to the road to Emmaus, and you've got these 2 disciples walking along the road. Jesus,
the first thing I wrote for this book was that page.
I was wondering if you wrote that, because a lot of authors will finish a book and then they'll go back and they'll figure out how to open it. But why was...
It was the first thing I wrote, because I don't know, I just really...
Why was that the place to start?
Because it was a revelation of me of I wonder what point the penny dropped with them all. Those people spent all this time with Jesus. When do you think the penny dropped? Because you think this divinity was shown all the time. And yet I kind of find it reassuring that as disciples, they're regular people, and you probably wake up the next day and you're kind of already questioning yourself.
Yeah.
Go, hold on, but that guy who was frothing and foaming at the mouth and then was or that arm that was here is hold on, maybe,
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just love that scene of even at the end when he told them, so I mean, he tells them once, gently, he tells them twice, about what's going to happen to you. I will be, and eventually he's sitting there again, I will be tortured, I will be crucified, and I will rise again on the 3rd day. It's no, no metaphors. You know, it's like he's spoken stories and metaphors all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, this is clear. Now listen to me. You know,
Yeah.
boom, boom, boom. And even then, like, they're not anticipating it. They just really think it's the end. And I just love that bit of like Jesus being playful. I mean, I remember before writing this book, reading a like 300-page book on just the playful nature of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Again, something kind of like I'd never thought about, but so playful all the time. And I like that idea of him toying with them as he reveals on that road, saying, "Tell me what's been happening." And they go, "You idiot, what do you mean tell you what? You must be the only person in the world that doesn't know what's happened the last few days."
And that part's actually in the gospel, isn't it? Where they say, you must be the only guy who's not
totally
heard.
And I like that. And he's like, let me, you know, and he starts, and then they go, it's that wonderful line of, did not our hearts burn within us? Because that's the start. For me, that was always a place to start the story. Like, now I want you to go, why?
Yeah.
Why does this make your heart burn within you? And it's the ultimate question of life, really.
Yeah. I think it's an important decision that you make to not change the words of Jesus. But inevitably, you have to do some things with Jesus. So, for example, when you're talking about his upbringing with John the Baptist, his cousin, and at one point, for example, you describe, John as being a bit sort of boisterous and telling jokes, and Jesus as being the more sort of quiet one. So you do have to make some decisions. I suppose you didn't have to, but you chose to make some decisions as sort of giving Jesus, like, I guess, like personality traits, especially in his younger life. That again, was that like theologically informed? Was that a council of theologians on Zoom, or was that you just thinking, this is what I imagine? I think
that's okay. Like? I felt, it's a line. It's just beginning to introduce this nature of Jesus, because actually you don't get to meet the guy until you're a third of the way through, really.
Right.
The meat of it happens there.
Yeah.
So we're just pointing towards his nature and his character in a way. But when it comes to actually the first words and the last words, they've got to be absolutely right. I didn't want to change a single one of those.
Yeah. And then did you otherwise write the book in order? In, did you just sit down and start with Mary and then just...
Yeah.
And did you decide before you started writing it, these are the viewpoints? Or did you sort of write up to the wedding at Cana and then go, let's go for, how about Thomas now? And then you go, let's go for Simon.
I did that with Andrew and with Craig and with another of the theologians. We kind of thought, we should be really contrasting, interesting perspectives to get it from. That covers all of humanity, basically. So that's why you want the innocent to the skeptic, to the arrogant, to the impulsive, to the broken, to the clinical, because that's all of us. Everyone's going to be one of those.
Were there perspectives that didn't, were there like names where you were like, maybe we could do it from this person's perspective that didn't make it? Or was it sort of those five?
I feel we covered it really well. It feels beautiful ending with Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
As a sort of broken teenager, find it, and then encountering Jesus, and just like, she's so all in and so human with it as well, and very tender sort of way to end. I feel sort of wraps up the quite sort of male middle bit of it, and it's I don't know, Jesus always affirming women. That was it felt right. Top and tailing the book with it at that.
I had a podcast with a scholar called Helen Bond, who wrote a book called Women Remembered, which is this sort of rediscovery of the women, because I mean, two of the characters that you speak from the perspective of are women. And there's this extraordinary thing in the Gospels where you can read all the way through the narrative, and then right at the end, when Jesus is being crucified, it says, oh, and by the way, there were these women at the cross. Oh, and by the way, they had been following Jesus and funding his ministry, like from their own pocket, like this whole time when you didn't get a mention until now. And so I agree that it's a worthwhile pursuit.
And also, like, you've got Mary Magdalene and then Mary, the mother of Jesus, at the foot of the cross.
Yes.
Where's everyone else?
Yeah.
The answer is
they fled
in terror, which is kind of reflective of all of us, really.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's so many bits. First of all, I'm really touched that you know it so well, and you've read it so much. I think you just got a great seeking heart. It's amazing. But there's certain parts of the book that really afterwards really have stayed with me.
Yes.
And I thought it was interesting. It might be interesting for you. But one, was the first time Jesus starts to do anything supernatural, which I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but it's like, where are these 17 years, between, temple, getting lost,
Yes.
day 12, and starting this ministry? And I don't know, I just get a feeling, and again, I don't know if this would be right, but it kind of feels like natural and right. It's almost like he knew as soon as he started to do something supernatural, the clock ticks.
Yeah. Because that's what happens. Mary comes to him.
And Mary is the one, and they're at this wedding, they're having fun, and they're like, Jesus is letting his hair down, he's having fun with his friends, and it's his mother. Like, I know, I really related to this, as like, I don't know, maybe with your mother, or like, some mother's tugging his seat, go, I need to talk to you. It's like, oh, I'm having fun.
Not now.
And it's like, but there's a problem. It's like, it's not my, and he says, it's not my problem.
Yeah.
Which is like really interesting.
Yeah, that is.
Because everything for the
strange.
rest of his life is his problem.
Yeah.
He's in everybody's element of all their life.
Yeah.
In a beautiful way. Healing, touching, affirming, correcting, guiding, helping, loving. But then he goes, this isn't my, it's like, he knows, it almost feels like he knows that once I begin, the clock ticking. But yet, on the other side, it's only a mother that knows, like, when. Time to fly. Spread the wings, time to fly. And eventually she keeps tugging. And then what I like is that Jesus doesn't even respond then to her. You know what she does? She just tells the servant, she knows she's got him.
Yeah.
She just says, do whatever he says. Yeah. And it's like, boom. The journey begins. Yeah. And for me, it's like, this is how I try and live my life. Like, I that's become a real thing for me in my faith. When I have my struggles and when I have my doubts, I go back to that of like, just do whatever he says. And it helps me.
Yeah. I'd not thought about that. The prospect of somebody coming. And of course, it's Jesus' mum. And this is at the beginning. And it seems like a relatively trivial thing. We've run out of wine.
Yeah.
But the idea of someone coming to Jesus for help and him going like, it's none of my business.
Yeah.
And yet you're right. As soon as he makes that decision, say, okay, fine. Then he's not saying that to anybody anymore. Now, like you say, the clock is ticking. I hadn't thought of that as like the sort of watershed moment.
Because now people are saying, hold on.
Yeah. Right.
And also, it was such an outrageous thing as well. It wasn't like, I can't, was it 60 gallons or 600 gallons? It was ridiculous. A lot. It was like some 200 pictures of this stuff. It wasn't like just like a couple of glasses.
Yeah.
And it's like, if we're going to start, this is a message, which is the message of the New Testament. It's a message of the great story. It's a message of extravagant love.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to start, we're not going to just give you a thimble full of wine.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah.
And then I like Thomas going, hold on. How did he do this?
Yeah, because that's the moment you switch over to Thomas, right? And then Thomas is sort of blown away. But then again, it's like sort of a few chapters later, you've got Thomas being like, okay, that was pretty weird, but it's not quite enough. Like, surely I've got to see a little bit more. And then
which he does. But then at the end of his, it's not the miracle. He goes, it wasn't the miracles that changed my heart. It was his love for people, for love for us. It's like the miracles he knows. The head part says this is undeniable. I've seen the guy walk on water. I can't. But it's like it was his love that really changed me.
Well, the most famous story of Thomas in the Gospels is him sort of demanding to see the wounds of Christ. And Jesus says something really interesting to him, which is he sort of appears to him and says, here I am, Thomas, touch my wounds. And he says, you believe because you've seen, blessed are those who believe without seeing. But I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but if you look at Christian art, it's always Thomas touching the wounds of Jesus. But the gospel never actually says that Thomas touches the wounds. Yeah. It just says that Thomas demands to see the wounds. And when Jesus shows up and says, here I am, Thomas drops to his knees, and says, my Lord and my God. And there's one reading of the story as if to say, Thomas had thought that what he wanted was like empirical evidence and to see the miracle. But when actually confronted with the person of Jesus, he realizes that that's not what it's about. I quite like that reading of John's Gospel.
Yeah. And also no, you're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also, I remember that when I first understood that, it used to challenge my faith a bit, because I used to think, well, hold on, maybe Jesus could be a ghost. He actually didn't feel the blood and the wounds.
Yeah, right.
It's like, maybe he's a ghost. But then the next line, he sits and breaks bread and eats fish with them.
Yeah.
Which kind of And then I found that reassuring.
Yeah.
My life is a whole. Listen, my faith stumbled. You've just seen. You basically summed up my. That's how my faith goes. And there's a dad, and then quite reassuring, and then back to my knees to listen to Mary to say, do whatever he says.
Yeah.
You've just witnessed it.
Yeah. That's a great. I've not thought of the moral of the story of the wedding at Cana in that way. The sort of just do what he says.
Tell me about you. Tell me where because you have such a brilliant understanding of all this, much greater than mine. Where does it leave? How do you feel about all of this?
Well, thank you. I'm interested in the New Testament from a sort of scholarly perspective. And
when did that begin?
A few years ago, I think I was talking about religion and theology, and I had a biblical scholar on my show. And as so often happens, I might have an expert in animal consciousness. And so I'll say, okay, this week I've got to sit down. I've got to learn about how octopus brains works. And as happened with the octopus brains, the same thing happens here, which is actually, this is way more interesting than I thought. And I want to keep looking into this. And so for me, the thing, like, I talk about this and I debate this all the time, and I debate whether Jesus was God or whether he even claimed to be God and all of this kind of stuff. But for me, the undeniable thing is that there's this extraordinary historical figure who did something extraordinary. And there's something really weird that happened that caused a bunch of people to start quite early on worshipping him, which is a very strange thing to do to a human being, especially in a Jewish culture. And so to me, getting at the Gospels from a scholarly perspective helps me to understand who this historical figure was. That's the thing I'm really interested in, almost in the way that somebody might be really interested in Julius Caesar or in whether the Iliad, whether the Trojan War really happened and whether that kind of stuff. I sort of take this approach.
That feels
to, the
to me like that was your point of entry.
Yes. Yeah.
But you've had such a journey and you've met so many amazing people and you've debated so many different angles and things.
Yeah.
Where's it led you to?
It's led me to, I used to be quite on board with the new atheism stuff. I've spoken about this a lot on my show.
What does that mean?
You know, like the sort of Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, it was really popular, the debates that they were doing, they called it new atheism.
Yeah.
And it was this body of like atheist thought with the God delusion, this kind of stuff, which was really popular. And it had this sort of quite strident, debate me bro kind of attitude. And I was really swept up by that. I thought that was really exciting and cool. And I was beginning to sort of shake that off and grow up a bit, essentially. And then running the podcast, what I've realized is that this is far more interesting and intricate. And I would say plausible than I'd given it credit for before. So, I'm still not a Christian. Some people say to me, like,
it's a funny word though, that anyway.
Yeah.
Like I'm less and less certain about the word.
Yeah.
You know what somebody said to me the other day? You're like this. The period of greatest growth ever in the history of the church was from 33 AD to 350.
Yeah.
And during this time, there was no church buildings, no sermons, but no singing, and no Bible.
Yeah.
And like we get very tied up in all of those things and the labels and even the phrase Christian.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not sure where, for me, it feels quite like man-made, these sort of words.
Yeah, and that is where I can definitely agree with, especially a Christian of your kind, which is to say someone who will say that and recognize that. Because some people place a lot of stock, particularly Catholics, they place a lot of stock in church tradition and the traditions that developed after Nicaea. And I look at that with a similar kind of man-made skepticism. And I think to myself, it also gives me license to, when I look at the New Testament and I think, some scholars think that Paul maybe didn't write that letter and that's a big problem. But for someone like me, it's like, who cares? If I decide that Paul didn't write 1 Timothy, then I'll just look at the rest of it and I'll try to work out what came between the lines. A good friend of mine said to me once, when there's all this discussion about whether we have the real words of Jesus and whether the Gospels are accurate and whether it's all apocryphal stories, he said that because these were written from early church traditions, Jesus was a real man who was doing real things. We can still know a lot about the character of Jesus. He said, imagine if, for example, have you heard of the Churchillian drift, where like quotes get attributed to Churchill, even though he never said them? Same thing happens with C.S. Lewis. Yeah. And he said, imagine if the only information you had historically about Churchill was a book of apocryphal quotes that he never actually said, but that people believed he said. You'd still get a pretty good picture of the kind of person Winston Churchill
That's
was.
worst case scenario. You still get a
Exactly.
pretty good.
You're still getting an image. And so I'm really interested in the scholarly stuff and like, well, did Jesus really say that? Was this an interpolation? Blah, blah, blah. Is this a translation thing? But the thing that's most fascinating to me below all of that is like, who was this guy and what was he doing to cause all of this? Even if it's a bunch of confusion and confused timelines, and even if some stories got in there that shouldn't have got in there, the fact that this scramble to write all of this down and turn it into
even with the drift.
Exactly, it's still
I think
extremely interesting.
If we could time travel, you would be one of the rough gang. So would I.
Yeah,
I don't think you'd be. I mean, even though you kind of like the headlines of you is like, professor, sort of Oxford. Well, are you a professor?
I'm not a professor. No.
You're very clever. Do you know what I mean? That could potentially like put you into the Pharisee type thing.
Right.
But you are the opposite. You are what you would have been running wild with Jesus, I think.
Yeah, I like that. So.
And also, I sort of always got the feel with Jesus. He loved the challenge. He loved the riposte. He loved the mental, verbal, theological challenges.
There's a lot of jousting, a lot of
jousting and brilliant sort of responses that have never been better. You know, whether it's in like, should we pay our taxes to Caesar or not? The Pharisees are trying to trip him up.
Mm-hmm.
And yet sort of that response of just like, well, whose head is on the coin? Pay to him and pay to God what is God. It's sort of brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a brilliant
And I would think that I see a beautiful alignment actually. I think if we go back in time travel, you'd be running wild with him.
Well, if the science ever gets there and we manage to go back in time, when people say, where would you go?
Yeah, where would you go? Come on, what would you do?
Of course you'd go to meet Jesus.
I love it. What point? Where would you go? Would you go after the resurrection or would you want to be there at the beginning? What about in the 17 years?
That's interesting. I think that the moment that you'd want to witness, if you could only have 5 minutes, would be the moment of the crucifixion. And the reason is that you would see that this was a man, the crucifixion happened, you would see whether the curtain tore, whether the sky opened, all of that kind of stuff. And it would give you all of that. I mean,
But they keep finding evidence for like the, I think in the sort of, the star stuff and they said there was
like the solar eclipse.
The solar eclipse, they've actually done it's the exact kind of like
That's really interesting, isn't
it? It's really interesting. And also that moment is kind of, also to see the first ever Roman Christian. Well,
yes, yeah.
The centurion
truly
Son of God. Yeah. This man is the Son of God.
But then part of me
that's interesting. You go to that moment. That's kind of cool.
But part of me would say, although, you want to see the resurrection, you want to see part of me wants to say I would just like to meet him walking along during his ministry and just say, listen, man, I've got 5 minutes.
Yes.
Who are you? Like,
are you the real deal?
Are you Messiah? Are you God? Are you claiming to be God? Like, that's what I'd want to do. I'd want to ask that question. And I mean, where would you go in Jesus' life? You get 5 minutes.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I think, so, I mean, if you think of the biblical, so there are a lot of people that did get that chance and did it come exactly for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Say, I mean, one bit you might not have noticed that I really like is John the Baptist's relationship with Jesus. We kind of touched on it, but there's a really nice moment where if you think if anyone in the Jesus orbit is going to believe in him, it's John the Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
Known him from birth, kicking inside my mother's stomach whenever Jesus walked in the room. Like, I know this guy is a real deal. I'm baptizing the River Jordan saying there was one is coming after me is like, I know.
Mm-hmm.
And yet when he was in Herod's prison, and he gets a chance to get a message to his disciples, the one thing he says is go back to Yeshua and just ask him, you really are who you say you are.
Is it you?
And I love that because like, if even John the Baptist had doubts because of he's like being tortured and in a brutal prison and like we're human, then I can have doubts. And it's like, he's been a real hero of mine actually, John the Baptist.
Me too. I think he's my favorite person.
Well, it's interesting you say that.
So
I'd be interested what I like about him is that everyone always, Jesus says there's no one being greater.
Yes.
He is the number one in the prophets.
That's
number
right.
one. And I always think we think to be number one in life, you've got to be like a leader. You got to be like, I would think Moses or one of these people, like on top of the mountain, the big beard, the loud voice, the authority. It's how we're brought up to think these are our people in our lives who are the leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it was the rough one who lived off the land
Camel
and was
skin.
wild and just loved this Yeshua character. Yeah. And he said, no one better. Why do you like him?
I think he's fascinating because he seems to be this sort of precursor to Jesus in a weird way. He's the introduction to Jesus. There's a bit of mystery as to who he was and why he was baptizing and why he found his way into the wilderness and what it means to preach a baptism for the repentance of sins and why Jesus would need to undergo that. All of these questions are so interesting. There are also communities of people who particularly revere John the Baptist. There's a group called the Mandaeans who are like this Gnostic sect who think that John the Baptist is the most important prophet. Now they see Jesus as a false prophet. Actually, there's this whole historical fascination with John the Baptist because and it's also the insistence early on that he is not the Messiah. You do it
he keeps saying, "I'm not the guy,"
which implies to me that at the time there were lots of people who thought he was the Messiah, and
because that's what happens. People want to think somebody's great, and then the power goes to your head.
And when Herod Antipas first hears about Jesus, he goes, "This guy is John the Baptist reborn," in the Gospels. And so, what was John the Baptist doing? If when he hears this Jesus guy, it reminds him of John. So it seems like John the Baptist had this incredible ministry, and he must have been doing all kinds of interesting things, and there were all kinds of people who thought he was the Messiah. And so, and we only get clues to that in the Gospels. And so I'd be fascinated. Do you know what? Maybe I'd go to the baptism because I'd love to meet John the Baptist.
With the sky open.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool to see too.
Because if you see that, then you know. Because you can't fake that, So in a way, that's as convincing as a resurrection. Because if you're there and you literally see this guy up in the voice of God going, "This is my son."
And the dove, you kind of get a proof of the Trinity.
Well, it's like...
You get to meet John, and you get to see Jesus. It's all there. I think
you know what?
That
they
might
all
be the
saw
moment.
all these things. And yet the next day, they would go, "Well,
not so sure.
The clouds could have, and was it thunder that sounded? And that dove, there had been a few doves around that day."
Never enough. What I do know, though, is that I speak to a lot of interesting people. I speak to some scientists. If I ever meet one who tells me that they're onto something with time travel, I'll know who to call to go back and meet John the Baptist.
I love it.
Bear Grylls. Thank you for your time.
Well, you know what? You're such a great guy, and really, I really mean it. You're doing such a beautiful job. Keep seeking, like all of us. And we're told when we seek, we find.
We'll see how it goes. Thanks again.
You're a great man.
Awesome. If you enjoyed that conversation, you might like my previous episode with James McGrath on John the Baptist. You can watch it by clicking the link that's on your screen. To support my work and get early, ad-free access to episodes, subscribe to my Substack at alexoconnor.com. Thanks for watching.